With a huge offseason of moves ahead for GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Vikings, one massive potential move has insiders buzzing that's sure to divide and surprise fans while also giving them glimpses of the past. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Vikings Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any updates surrounding the Vikings. We saw a big uptick in the past few days. We appreciate all the love and all the new subscribers, so welcome to the channel. So stay tuned for all the offseason moves that the Vikings are going to be making. But with that, let's hop into the first topic and our only topic of the day because it's a big one, and that's Aaron Rodgers to the Vikings. So before we hop into that, Sam Darnold, as we know, cost himself a lot of money in the last two games against the in week 18 against the Lions and wild card against the Rams when the lights were shining at their brightest. With that said, Sportrack still projects he will bump his annual salary up from $10 million to $40 million per season over a new 4-year contract. It doesn't make sense for Minnesota to pay Darnold that much money unless the franchise believes he can sustain the status of a top 10 quarterback for years to come, particularly because JJ McCarthy is on a rookie deal worth $22 million. And now this is where things are going to get a little bit interesting. It's nonsensical to go into next season without a proven veteran either to compete or back up McCarthy, who missed the entirety of his rookie campaign with a knee injury and will play next year at 22 and has never taken a regular season snap. Daniel Jones is still there, however. The New York Giants starter joined the Vikings midseason and is a potential option. However, if that doesn't happen, the Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers could prove a possibility. And the main outlet that is pushing this narrative and running with this is Sports Illustrated. Colin Keane saying on there, it's not difficult to figure out where Rodgers would look to land if he escaped from New York. Just simply rule out non-contenders or teams that already are set at quarterback. Once you've done that, the two teams come into plain view, the Minnesota Vikings and Pittsburgh Steelers. And with the Steelers reportedly lacking interest in Rodgers, the Vikings stand out even more as a landing spot. And before we hop into what we think about it, the thing that is key to look at here is there's a reason Rodgers isn't deciding on his Jets' future until New York's hired a head coach and GM. If the Jets and their staff don't look up to snuff, Rodgers will either retire or take his talents elsewhere. And that is the main key where the GM and head coach could play a massive role in that decision. But that said, what better situation would he be able to come into? Now, this isn't saying that we agree with this necessarily, but looking at the different situations out there for Rodgers to go to, the Jets, doesn't matter who they hire as their head coach or GM. I think they're screwed regardless, no matter who they bring in there. But if Rodgers were to go anywhere of the available teams that aren't currently rebuilding, you really only have the Vikings. And as you guys have seen on this channel, we already think that Sam Darnold is going to be moved on from. It's going to be JJ McCarthy time, or at least Daniel Jones to start the season. But this Aaron Rodgers layer does add a little bit to that as well, because he's coming off of not a great season and not a past few seasons as well. We know he had that injury that last season that kept him out the entire season, but then this season was very tumultuous for him both on and off the field and in the media. So that's going to be a lot of noise that Minnesota would have to take on in that sense. But what better situation would he have to come into than coming into a team with the best wide receiver in the NFL, one of the best tight ends in the NFL, the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, one of the best defenses, and a coach that is a quarterback whisperer and tends to bring out the best in whatever quarterback that he has available, and that is Kevin O'Connell. The quarterback whisperer, as many people are calling him, would be perfect for Aaron Rodgers. Now, is this to say that I want Aaron Rodgers as Minnesota Viking? No, I think he's past his prime. I think he's given all he has to give, but we have been doing that with him many times in the past where we thought he was done. He goes out and wins an MVP. So if that latter part is the case, hopefully it's not for a team that has anything to do with Minnesota, or if he does have that in him, bring him into Minnesota. But there would be a lot needing to make that happen. And one of the things to look at is that Darnold will be an unrestricted free agent in mid-March if the Vikings don't extend him before then. At that point, he can sign with any team interested. Meanwhile, Rodgers is technically under contract with the Jets through 2025, which means that organization will either have to trade or cut him during the offseason for the 4-time MVP to leave. Now, that's some pretty interesting stipulations because then Minnesota wouldn't have to take on a big contract if the Jets were to cut him, and they could sign him on a 1-year deal. But if the Vikings simply let Darnold walk, which is a real possibility, and that's when they bring him in, and then you base Jones's future on the franchise based on that, and then you have maybe a preseason competition. I know Daniel Jones versus Aaron Rodgers isn't really too much of a competition, but again, you do keep Daniel Jones as a reliable safety valve because we know, as we talked about on this show before, that he is somebody who has some decent upside potential with this team if he is at 100%, and we've seen what his ceiling and floor is. But Jones makes just as much sense as a backup competitor for McCarthy as Rodgers does, perhaps even more because of his age, which is pretty significant considering Rodgers is basically almost done at this point and old and gray. However, if Minnesota lets Jones walk in free agency, they may be able to get a compensatory pick in return depending on the contract he signs, which may incentivize the Vikings to go a different way. Now, if any of this is sounding familiar, we've seen the memes already start. It does look like a decent graphic there, courtesy of Clutch Sports. As much as this would be nice to see happen as far as history repeating itself and have Aaron Rodgers go into Green Bay once a year and play them twice a year and get revenge on them, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers still has it in the tank. He's coming off of an Achilles injury that led to a really bad season. I know he's on a horrible Jets team where that was a big factor in that, with a bad offensive line. Minnesota's offensive line ain't too much better, but they are a little bit better when fully healthy. The weapons are also objectively better with Minnesota. You don't have a past their prime Devontae Adams. You don't have Alan Lazard. You don't have an Alan Lazard who just doesn't have too much else to offer. Garrett Wilson is a dog. I'll give him that. But when you look at the receiving core for the Jets versus the receiving core for the Vikings, and as well as tight ends, former Viking Ty Conklin as well, there is a very big night and day difference as far as offensive weapons, especially if you look at who the running back is. Breece Hall, he's a stud. But if Minnesota can have a two-back tandem to go with Rodgers and all these weapons, that's something that would be very interesting to see in Minnesota. And looking at Rodgers' stats, they do speak for themselves. I know everyone has seen his stats over the past few seasons, not just the past few seasons, the past few decades, really. He's just been in the league for so long, almost as long as I've been a football fan. I remember when Brett Favre did leave the Green Bay Packers, initially retiring, and the reins were handed over to Aaron Rodgers. We saw the same thing happen with Jordan Love, and then going to the Jets. What would be pretty wild is if they do a trade with the Vikings and the Jets where it's a very poetic kind of cinematic ending almost to that story, where Darnold goes back to the Jets and Rodgers goes to the Vikings to fulfill Brett Favre's destiny almost, and as seemingly any Packers legend's destiny of going from Packers, Jets, Vikings, and then Sam Darnold ends up back with the team that drafted him. Not necessarily sure if that's how things will shake down. I don't know if they're going to do a one-for-one trade in that sense. I think it will be likely the other one where Darnold becomes an unrestricted free agent and just walks, and Aaron Rodgers is cut. I'm not sure if the Jets will be the one to pick up Darnold, but someone definitely will. I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the NFC because the NFC teams love overpaying for quarterbacks that don't necessarily warrant a massive price tag. We saw that with Sam Darnold. It's not to discount what he did this season. It just goes to show that when the lights got brightest, he just was not good enough to take this Minnesota Vikings team further than a wild card spot. But if Aaron Rodgers has enough gas left in the tank, it would be interesting to see if he can go on a one-year Cinderella run and just go out with a Super Bowl. If that were the case, I think a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans would be singing a very different tune than they are likely going to be singing in the comments of this video. I know you guys are going to be very divided on that as far as either loving this idea or completely hating it and having a lot of things to say about Rodgers. We're going to be looking forward to see what you guys think of this as well. That's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is comment of the day. It's going to be a fun segment we're going to try and keep as a very common recurring one on this channel. And this is in response to our last video talking about Cam Skattebo coming to Minnesota. 100% agree with you. We need to have our own Gibbs, and we haven't had a good explosive running back since Dalvin Cook in his prime. I would be even fine if we let Jones walk and drafted Skattebo and re-signed Akers. If not, if we got good INT line and had our own Sonic and Knuckles, this offense would be very hard to take down. I definitely agree with that. I don't know if Akers and Skattebo would be the proper tandem to run with. I still think you got to go out and get another guy in free agency, but that's going to be something to look forward to in one of our next videos coming up surrounding Aaron Jones and one potential free agent that would be great in this Minnesota Vikings team, especially if they go out and draft Cam Skattebo or another one that we also have another video planned for because the draft is going to be coming up just around the corner. It's going to come fast. I know it seems like it's far away, but it's going to be coming fast, and there's a lot of good running backs available. So stay tuned for that. But that's been this episode of Vikings Digest. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss the episodes when they drop, so you're the first ones to see it. But with that, I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.